Cyberpunk 2077. I don't have to tell you about the disastrous launch of the game, but since the release of the title, there have been a number of updates, and CD Projekt has continued to insist that they're going to keep working on the game, release expansions, and update it until it's up to the state that it should have been at launch. And to that end, today they announced patch 1.5, also known as the next-gen update, which has already bolstered player numbers here on PC. For example, the update did come out on PC as well, and directly after the live stream, the patch became available to download on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. But yeah, the numbers for Cyberpunk were sitting in the tens of thousands, and now we're seeing close to 20,000 players, so plenty of people are going back, checking it out to see what's changed, what's been improved. And what I'm going to do is go through all of the details shared in the stream as well as the patch notes and give you a quick rundown of the key details surrounding this patch and what you can expect from it. If you want to watch the full stream, you can check it out on Cyberpunk 2077's official YouTube page titled Cyberpunk 2077 Red Streams. So with that out of the way, here are all of the basics you need to know about patch 1.5. The first thing the stream did was show footage of Cyberpunk 2077 running on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X with the next-gen update enabled. And aside from graphics looking closer to PC, the frame rate is also enhanced. You can choose between essentially fidelity mode and performance mode, 60 FPS versus 30 FPS with higher resolution. But on Xbox Series S, it is going to run at 30 frames per second due to its hardware limitations, but still a nice step up in terms of graphical fidelity. From there, the stream introduced new and reworked perks. For example, they replaced one perk that a lot of people found useless, preventing underwater detection, and replaced it with something more useful. And you can find the full details on these redesigned perks in the patch notes. You can see all of the new perks and what perks have been removed and replaced with what. It's all there if you want to check that out. They've also gone ahead and made perks surrounding throwing knives useful because throwing knives can actually be recovered after being thrown. Originally, any time you threw a throwing knife, it would just disappear into the ether, which made no sense and made that playstyle untenable. But now you can actually pick up any knives you've thrown, and there's actually a new feature that will have the knife automatically return to you after a brief cooldown, almost like a boomerang, as the CD Projekt developers put it. And higher rarity knives will have reduced cooldown. The higher the rarity, the lower the amount of time you have to wait before a knife you've thrown returns to you. Though at any point you can forego the cooldown if you manually pick it up yourself, but if the knife's too far away, you kind of have to wait a little bit for it to return to you. This is definitely a very nice addition and makes throwing knife builds definitely a lot more viable. Though I do wish there was like an animation for the knives returning when they're thrown. It feels like they just kind of magically reappear in your hands, but that is more of a nitpick than anything else. From there, the stream talked about enhanced enemy AI, guaranteeing all kinds of new and different behaviors during combat, and in the patch notes, there are details about how dismemberment triggers have been improved. Enemies will block and evade better. Enemies from different factions will behave differently depending on which faction they're from, and that'll make them either reckless, aggressive, balanced, defensive, or cautious. And then when it comes to followers, it was detailed how now when followers take too much damage, they're going to be temporarily disabled. The developers then delved into changes and improvements made to vehicles, starting with how you can now turn on lights on your motorcycle's wheels, which looks kind of neat. And there's been general changes to the behavior of driving. For example, donuts are a whole lot easier now to do with both cars and motorcycles. They also detailed how handling has been tweaked so that you can drift around corners better, and they talked about better suspension even for vehicles. And in the patch notes, you'll find additional details about how they improve driving, like the introduction of a more consistent new braking system, ABS simulation or anti-lock braking system simulation. They also fixed the bug where if you summon or call multiple cars, are all going to kind of stack together and occupy the same space and collide and crash and kind of go haywire. That's no longer the case. Now when you call multiple cars, they're all going to be situated in different locations. They also improved first-person driving by just making everything a lot more visible, by improving visibility so that this mode of driving is more viable. This then brings us to crowd AI, which they place in a special emphasis on how that's been enhanced. Essentially, if you draw your gun and start pointing it around, people will run away, and if you start start shooting especially, pedestrians will react a lot more naturally. And some pedestrians might even carry weapons with them and may start shooting at you. And there are even scenarios where pedestrians might aggro each other and start fighting each other. They've also said that they've smoothened out running animations for crowds, and also crowds no longer disappear when you turn around when you do a 360, or if you do a 180 and then turn back. Before this patch, they would just magically pop out of existence. They've made it so that that's no longer the case, which is definitely a nice thing. Though in the stream, I did notice every once in a while NPCs streaming in and out. It happened occasionally, but at least NPCs aren't just disappearing outright when you just turn around, so still a huge improvement. At one point when the player was wreaking havoc, a random gang followed the player with their car and started attacking the player. So beyond pedestrians, gangs in the crowd might also join in. They briefly touched upon the redesigned UI for skipping time, just a lot clearer and just a more convenient way to know exactly how many hours you want to skip. And then going back to pedestrian AI, when they're driving cars, they will also flee and panic if they hear gunshots or if they're being shot at. So drivers might just floor it and start driving away as fast as they can. They might run over pedestrians along the way, which we did see in the stream, or things might not go well for them and they might crash in the panic of trying to get the hell out. There's definitely a lot more reactivity there, and it looks better than everyone just getting out of their cars and crouching in fear if a gunshot is heard, as it was before. Then came details about quality of life improvements for the map, with icons now being a lot easier to differentiate, with certain icons actually being reworked, like how now main quests and side quests are separated by main quests being yellow icons and side quests being these green icons. And they also added a map icon filter so you can decide which icons you want the map to show at any given point in time. And the map also plays a role in the way they've reworked the way fixer gigs work, which now come in sets. You actually have a standing with the fixers now, and as you complete gigs, you'll fill up essentially this bar that says how many gigs you need to complete before you can get to the next stage of your affiliation with the fixer, and that'll unlock the next set of fixer gigs and just keeps things more organized and adds some semblance of a sense of progression with the fixers you've been doing jobs for. It was also relayed that with this patch, if you complete all of the gigs for a specific fixer, you'll earn a special reward for that. Also rebalanced is the game's economy, with now more cash being awarded, prizes being rebalanced across the board, and purchasable items like vehicles are no longer as expensive as they used to be, so you can actually afford a lot more stuff now. Some of that money you'll no doubt use to buy weapons, and that's where enhancements to the Second Amendment shop comes in, Wilson's gun shop. This is where you can buy some of the new armaments that have been introduced with this patch, 2 new weapons, 4 new scopes, and 10 new muzzle brakes. And it was also noted that Wilson's stock will change every day, so that's when we can start discovering some of the new content added, as well as cycling through existing weapons. Speaking of gigs, a lot of that stuff happens via phone call. You're constantly getting phone calls from people who want to hire you for work. Well, to mitigate some of the potential interruptions there, patch 1.5 adds the option to reject non-essential calls, and if you decide to reject a call, that'll be followed up with a text message that you can read and get all of the necessary information there. And they've also made it so that when, say, 2 calls are coming in at once, they don't stack on top of each other anymore, which was an issue before. They'll actually play in sequence now. There are also some major additions to your apartment. One of the best additions, I think, is the ability to change your appearance using the mirror in your apartment, which was sorely missing prior to patch 1.5 in the Cyberpunk world, where modifying your body is commonplace. It was a weird absence, but it is here finally, and it basically brings up a more limited character creator where you can choose options like customizing hair, brows, eyes, lashes, scars, makeup, piercings, etc. And there are also some new color options for hair, as well as additional customization options like new lipstick styles and new makeup options for eyes and whatnot. So options for character appearance have been expanded to a degree. And then another major addition is the ability to customize your apartment by purchasing one of 6 different styles that you can redecorate your apartment with. You cannot customize individual components of the apartment. You're not going to go full Animal Crossing here, but you can decide to change up the look from 6 predetermined cosmetic packages. And alongside that, they've added 4 new apartments that you can rent in different parts of Night City, each with a different style. So you can actually buy an expensive corpo apartment, or you can buy this more Japanese-themed apartment in Japantown. And the goal was basically to add extra layers of role-playing. The Japantown apartment was the one they showed off, and gotta say, it looks pretty cool. And there are new interactions like lighting incense, which I think is specific to the Japantown apartment. And they're just new interactions that they've added to objects found in the apartments. And now some of these apartment interactions will actually give you buffs, like sleeping, for example, will give you a boost called Rested, which enhances the amount of XP you gain. Showering will give you a buff called Refresh, which for 1 hour allows health regeneration during combat up to 60%. And brewing coffee gives you the Energized buff, which gives you an additional 25% to max stamina and an additional 30% to stamina regeneration rate. And they also detailed small little things like how showering will actually automatically remove V's clothes now. So that way you're not showering in your clothes as it was default prior to patch 1.5. As for how renting works, it's not like a monthly payment plan or anything. You just pay a one-time fee and the apartment is essentially permanently rented. And you can do that through a terminal by navigating to the website, or you can directly go to the apartment and rent it out right there. And they've made it a point to highlight that certain key features will be shared across all apartments, like your stash being shared across all apartments, or all apartments having that mirror for character customization. They also made some minor additions to romance, like how you can message romanceable characters more throughout the development of your relationships, and romance characters' homes, which can be used as safe houses. If you sleep in their bed, there is a chance that you may wake up with your romance character next to you. Little things that just help enhance the role-playing aspect. It was also around this time that they confirmed that they're finally adding a walking toggle for the PC version of Cyberpunk 2077, which definitely was something of a glaring omission. Some other new content include new poses for photo mode, including new Johnny Silverhand-specific poses during flashback quests. And then finally, the stream concluded by showing a chart highlighting which platforms will get which enhancements from patch 1.5. The last-gen version, the PS4 and Xbox One versions, are missing things like ray-traced local shadows, various visual quality improvements, and improved crowd reactions. The first two I get, technical limitations and all that, but the improved crowd reactions missing from the last-gen versions, that seems like a strange omission, and hopefully that'll get added to those versions as well. One specific addition for the PC version is benchmarks. You can actually run a benchmark through Cyberpunk 2077 and gauge how well it performs based on the hardware that you have. And AMD graphics card users will be happy to learn that they've added support for AMD's Fidelity Effect Super Resolution feature. And then console players who are sitting on the fence about Cyberpunk 2077 and maybe just want to try it out first will actually have access to a free trial for Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation 5. Basically, it's a 5 hours long free trial that you'll have access to for 30 days. You can do whatever you want within those 5 hours. Last but not least, the stream emphasized that there are a ton of bug fixes with this patch, including many that they didn't detail in the patch notes because they didn't want to bloat it up too much and only focus on what's most important and what's most blatantly fixed or improved. And they also confirmed that there are some secrets and content that they decided intentionally not to detail and leave it for players to discover, whatever that might be. To close things off, here are some details from the patch notes not shared in the stream that you might be interested in, like how there have been adjustments to the number of mod slots for clothing. They've just kind of rebalanced that and made it better. The easy game difficulty, they've said they've made a little more challenging because they made it a little too easy. Some stats have been reworked, like evasion is now replaced by what's called mitigation chance and mitigation strength. Mitigation chance being the probability of reducing damage, and mitigation strength being how much that damage gets reduced by when the effect triggers. They tweaked effects that do damage over time, like burning, bleeding, and poison, to do a little less damage than they used to. V no longer has to flee the area to evade police as long as V stays hidden, though the drawback to that is that it'll take longer for police to stop pursuing you. Some neat quality of life changes to how cyberware works, like the ability to sell unused cyberware to Ripper docs, and there are various rebalances and adjustments to cyberware that are detailed in the patch notes as well. A few other things that caught my eye include fixes and improvements to smoothen out NPC animations during combat, increased accuracy of followers during combat, and just general across the board tweaks to combat that you'll find full details about here in the patch notes. The weather system apparently has been tweaked and changed so that the progression of how weather changes happens more logically and naturally. They also apparently reduced how much loot will be lying around now, as they wanted to give players more breathing room. And personally, I think that is a good change. I did find sometimes that too much time was spent looting, and a lot of that loot felt pretty useless compared to the gear that I already had equipped. But yeah, these are just some of the things that caught my eyes. There are tons of more details about very specific fixes, and if you want to check those out, feel free to roam the patch notes, which I'll link in the description below. So obviously, patch 1.5, this next-gen update, isn't the grand overhaul that people are waiting for, but they did add some pretty neat new content, and they made some good fixes that don't overall contribute to Cyberpunk 2077 now being in the state that it should have been at launch. I think there's still a lot of work to be done to get there, but this is definitely a step in the right direction, and I'm curious to see how much further CD Projekt will take these improvements. There is still no New Game Plus, which is disappointing. Still no enhancements to the police system so that, they actually come in via vehicles or they chase after you via cars and all that stuff. So again, a lot of systems still not in place. A subway system, there's a mod for it now, but officially the game doesn't have such a thing. So on and so forth. There's a host of things that people can point out that still missing from the game, but this is a free update that does include some neat enhancements. So that'll be welcome for the folks that still do play Cyberpunk or are waiting for the game to be in a more ideal state before diving back in. I'm curious to hear from you what you think about these updates, whether you think this is a step in the right direction, whether you're satisfied with what patch 1.5 has to offer, or if you are still going to wait for more enhancements to come down the line. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.